Jam Ghajar, or Jamshid Ghajar, is a board-certified neurosurgeon, clinical professor of neurosurgery, director of the Stanford Concussion and Brain Performance Center, and president of the Brain Trauma Foundation in New York City and Palo Alto. He's here to talk to us about VR and concussion and attention and more. Is he here? Oh, there he is. Oh, here he is.
All right, does this work? Yeah.
You forgot to
So,
keep everybody on.
I think Lisa put me at the end because it's about attention, and you guys are at the limits. But thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is where I live at Stanford. So I want to tell you a little bit about the brain. So we've been talking a lot about the brain, and a lot of people don't know that there are about, does anyone know how many brain cells, how many neurons there are in the brain? About? 100 billion, right. Do you know where 80% of them are? So 80% of your brain cells are in one little area. Cerebellum, granule cells, they're all there. What are they doing? We're going to talk about that. So they're predicting the future. So I'll give you the news before. So our brain is actually a predictive machine. That's what it does. It predicts what's about to happen because there are delays in processing, and you want to play in the present. And the only way to do that is be in the future. So I'll get into that. But concussion actually is a great model to study the disruption of the brain in time. So the brain is using time to understand space. And it's really a physics problem. And I wish we had more physicists involved in neuroscience because they could talk about it. And we're talking about, so I'm talking about metrics for how do you measure how well somebody interacts in the present. And I'm using eye movements as a good metric for that. But I'm going to look at beyond that because attention is really what we want to measure. Attention is you synchronizing to information in space and time so you can interact with it. It's a very difficult problem. The brain is got to solve that problem. And we can see in concussion how that actually deals with it. I'm a founder of SyncThink. It's a company that was started to commercialize the product and got FDA approval. It recently got Series A funding, and it's here in Palo Alto. I'm also president of the Brain Trauma Foundation. We do the national guidelines for traumatic brain injury. And what I do is operate on severe traumatic brain injury. So I'm on call today, actually, but somebody else is taking my call while I give this lecture. So I operate on people who have severe traumatic brain injury, do craniotomies, take out blood clots. And then I see all the Stanford athletes who have concussions. And I also have a clinic over at the Stanford Neuroscience Health Center where I see people with concussions. And I'm also involved, funded by the Department of Defense, to define concussion with other colleagues. And we're actually pretty close to defining concussion, you'd be happy to hear, because there is no definition. It's really, I call it the fog of concussion. There's no accepted definition. A lot of people think that we know what concussion is. A lot of people think the NFL knows what concussion is. They don't. And I think right now, it's if you have a headache after a hit to the head, you have a concussion, you have a brain injury, go into a dark room, and hopefully get better in a couple of weeks. And so we have millions of kids, actually, sitting in dark rooms, getting chronically fatigued, depressed, huge headaches, and the actual treatment is worse than the disease, the concussion itself. So we're going to be changing that, early exercise, I'll tell you a little bit about that, and it's kind of the ways that we're diagnosing concussion presently. So Will Smith in the concussion movie, NFL, CTE brains. There's so many articles now on concussion and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's the dinner table talk, I guess. It used to be coma in the 80s and 90s. People were really interested in coma, and now you talk about coma, everyone falls asleep. But they were really interested in concussion. So traumatic brain injury has always been on the radar and affects, mostly young people. It's the #1 cause of death and disability in young people is traumatic brain injury. And it used to be from car accidents, but now it's actually elderly falling and hitting their heads is the #1 cause of severe traumatic brain injury. So what's the main problem in concussion? And we hear this sometimes, 17 kids die every year playing football. Is it connected to a prior concussion? Maybe, but 17 hits versus trillions of other hits the math doesn't compute. But the main problem is really attention impairment. So we get into what's attention. How do you pay attention? And what's happening in concussion is acute disorientation. So all of you are orienting to me talking, hopefully, or you're orienting to something you're thinking about, but you're orienting to something in time and space. And usually that thing, or you, or it, is moving. And the problem with, and we had a great presentation before me about second sight, and when you go to optometrists or ophthalmologists, they're looking at static vision. Can you read that chart? Or you go to the DMV. I was at DMV today. By the way, don't get your driver's license renewed. If you want to, you can spend the whole day there. I was there for 5 hours. But one thing they do is they make you read a static chart, okay? But you're not sitting in a parking lot reading somebody's license plate. Cars are moving. And that's not the eye, that's the brain. The brain's got to keep up with, predict where things are going to be and move your eye in the appropriate position. So that requires prediction. Very different. So dynamic vision is very different from static vision. And I'll show you how we evaluate that. So really, attention is spatial and temporal orientation to content. And that content is moving. So 80% of our attention is visual, requiring spatial and temporal prediction. And the disruption of that makes you feel like you're in a fog, you're dazed, out of sync. These are all terms used by concussion patients. They all feel like they're out of sync, or if you're jet lagged. A lot of times you feel the same kind of things. So, but it's a process of synchronization. You've got to synchronize with things that are happening in the future so you can interact with them in the present and then be aware in the past. And I'll show that in a minute. But here's an example. By the time you see that tennis ball, of course this ball is going very fast, by the time you see that tennis ball, it's passed. You have to swing your racket before the ball gets there. In fact, your brain is swinging the racket all the time before content gets there. It's called the predictive brain state. And you need to have spatial and temporal. You have to predict both time and space. So here's my main sentence. You expect the future to interact in the present and experience the past. So all of you are in the past here, but you want to listen to me, or you want to play tennis, so you have to be in the future. So most of the brain is actually in the future, so it can be in the present moment interacting, whether it's cognitively or motorically, and you can experience it in the past. So how do we measure it? So we want to measure how well you pay attention, how well you synchronize with that moving target, with the moving content, spatially and temporally. And so we're very fortunate to have in humans and higher primates the fovea. And so what happens, when you're looking at something like all you can see is your thumb when you put your hand out. Everything else is blurry. That's what you're focusing on. And as it moves, you can predict where it is and keep your thumb on your fovea. So your brain is moving your eyes to keep your eye on your target. So, but what you need to do is prediction. It's a very important part of it. So your cat or dog has saccadic eye movements. They don't have smooth pursuit. Smooth pursuit is something we just see in higher primates. It's a recent evolutionary development. So I like to evaluate orientation 4 ways. So you're looking at something. You can be static. It can be static. It's not moving. That's fairly easy. You can look at it. Or you're static. It's moving. So we have dynamic. I call it 0, 1. So that's moving. This is a test that we do with our eye tracking, which I'll show you. And then vestibular is it's static and you're moving with respect to it. And then dynamic is both of you moving. Okay? So those are the 4 conditions. And those are all involved in orientations, dynamic orientation. So iSync is the trademark of the test that we use. The company is called SyncThink. And what we know is that the attention network, and this is a very simplified network for attention, but it really is the prefrontal cortex, which is cognitive and motor pathways, decide they want to play tennis. The parietal lobe tells you where it's going to be, and the cerebellum tells you when. So you have orientation in time and space to information, so you can do it. So most of the injury, a lot of people think concussion or traumatic brain injury. If you hit the back of your head, you're walking down the street and maybe you're drunk, you fall back, you hit the back of your head, that the back of your brain will be injured, right? It's not. I've never taken a clot out of the back of somebody's brain. The back here, the visual cortex, is preserved. Sometimes you get little epidurals and little things occur, cracked skulls here, but inside the brain, we don't see damage here because the damage is occurring because of the neck. The neck is producing a concussion, which is a whole other talk. But your neck is whipping your brain around, and this front part, because of evolution, is farthest away from the fulcrum of the neck. So all the damage we see in concussion and severe traumatic brain injury is the front part of the brain, frontal lobes and anterior temporal lobes. And that's where we take the clots out, are all up here and over here. They're not back here. So this whipping causes disruption of the attention circuit in the front and also the brainstem level. So the future of brain technology is in the eyes. That's where, I think that what you're going to see a lot with AR and VR coming on, that they'll start putting eye trackers inside of those, and then you'll be able to see people's attention online as they're interacting with the outside world. And you'll see more and more analytics. This company that we have is very much into analytics. We're doing the analytics of how well you pay attention, and we've done lots of studies. The Department of Defense has put in over $30 million in developing this technology. We've just finished several clinical trials, including a trial of 10,000 people looking at normal eye tracking from 7 to 70, which I'll share with you. So this is the product. It comes in a nice suitcase. It's the current product, when we've gone through several VR platforms, the current product is a Gear VR headset with built-in eye trackers, which I'll show you. It's got a Samsung tablet, and on the tablet you can do the eye tracking test. It's FDA approved for detecting eye tracking impairment, and we have a 10,000 subject database. It takes 60 seconds. The actual test takes 30 seconds, but to get the report coming out, it takes 1 minute. So the thing that's different here is this is a headset you can get from Samsung free when you buy their phone, but what we do is we put in lenses and we put in cameras, and then we measure the eye tracking, and I'll show you the test in a minute. So the test is actually a dot going around a circle, so it's very predictable. You have to give somebody a predictable stimulus, so the brain can say, aha, it's predictable. I know where it's going to go. I'm going to move the eyes to that. And you look at the synchronization is the gaze compared to the target. We measure the radial error, tangential error. This radial error is predicting how well you spatially predict, whereas this tangential error is how well you predict in time. So you have time and space prediction with these two markers here. So on the platform, and this platform now is being used, we used it at Stanford over the last 2 years. Now all the Pac-12 schools, all 12 schools in Pac-12 are using this as their concussion platform, and so we give them lots of things. We have check the eyes, the task of the dot going around a circle. We also do vestibular inside VR, so we have the person move, and we keep the target virtually still and see how well they synchronize with that. We do balanced cognitive tests, reaction times. This is all on the platform. We can see the eyes on the Samsung tablet. These are infrared emitters. You can see them reflecting off the eye. That picks up the eye position. And so we can measure where the eye is compared to the target. This is a report just showing the dot. Each one of these is a camera snapshot of the eye position. So it's going around a circle. We measure the variance in this direction and in this direction. Here's a score and the quality score. We also measure a vestibular ocular reflex, so that's the target still, and you're moving with respect to it. How well do you maintain focus? That's another point of orientation. I went through those 4 things: static, the target's moving, dynamic, vestibular is where you're moving, and then they both move together. 4 different conditions. You can measure all that with this VR eye tracking platform. So here's what we see in our nice normal, as you see the eyes seem to be going around in a circle, but here it is with respect to the target. Very little variance in this direction, this direction. The person's maintaining very good synchronization with the dot. And this is the mean position error. The mean position error is a little bit negative, and I'll get to that in a minute. It seems like they have brakes on it, which I'll show you. But what we see in concussion is this. This is how I'm getting into timing. You'd think that concussion patients would be slow, right? They'll be slow, they won't follow the target, be behind the target. Well, actually, they're ahead. They're jumping ahead to the future, where the target's going to be. The target's not there yet. And so this is what we see in a lot of concussion patients, that they're disinhibited. And so the way that I think I have it next one. So the way that you're in the present is you break the future. So you have this impulse to be in the future. So the way to think about it is you're playing tennis. When the person serves the ball, you want to swing your racket right away. And the way you control it is by breaking your arm so that it arrives at the same time as the ball. So you break the future to be in the present, to be aware in the past. That's what you're doing. So the brain is a predictive machine, but the way it works is that, and one analogy I give to patients is, you want to go on the freeway at 60 miles an hour. The way the brain works, it presses all the way down the gas, goes 120, and uses the brake to go 60. That's why the brain weighs 2% of the body and takes 20% of the energy. It's full on and uses brakes to get very fine control by lifting off from the brake. If you wanted to change speed using the gas, you'd have a lot of jerky movements, like you see in concussion. The person's jumping ahead. This is the recovery curves we see. So here's most of the Stanford football players recover pretty quickly. They're athletic. We put them on a stationary bike right away. We exercise them. So the new thing is, there's lots, and we just published a paper on this, a meta-analysis showing that early exercise promotes recovery. So if you have kids or anyone else who's had a concussion, get them on a stationary bike, get them to do exercise. They get better a lot quicker. Don't put them in a dark room. We also do vision training on all the athletes, and we do vestibular and ocular training, and that gets them better quicker as well. So here's somebody recovering. You can see somebody who's a really bad concussion with big forward jumps in their eye movements, and they get better over weeks. So here's a video of, this is the right eye and the left eye following the target. And this is a normal person. You can see they have good tracking. You can see that they're synchronizing really well. We measure the variance of the two eyes. Here's somebody with a concussion. Now watch what happens. You see the eyes jump ahead. See the eyes? I won't get this red dot. See that? They're jumping ahead where the target's going to be. So the brakes aren't working. And then 4 months later, their eye tracking improves. So here it just shows the example of somebody, this is on when they first have the injury. You can see these big forward jumps. This is our norms here. This person's way out here. And then this shows the week 4, slow recovery. They're coming back in. Week 6, they're coming back to normal again. So their inhibitory control is getting better. One way you measure that is the mean phase error. So if they don't have good control, they're forward. You're leaning forward. Your brakes don't work. And then as you improve, it turns green. You're backwards. You've got good brakes. We also can see this pattern too here, where some people are very good when they're looking around, but they come around to going downwards and they lose it. They start jumping ahead. So we're actually picking up dynamic visual problems in people on the left side, the right side, the bottom, very rarely on the top. So we do eye tracking for all the Stanford athletes, freshmen when they first come in, and about 5% have abnormal dynamic vision. And it's usually in a field they don't use for their sport. So we have a couple of volleyball players who down here, they're really terrible, but they're playing volleyball up here all day long. They're really good. Their dynamic vision's really good. So training them up, would improve their orientation. And in the public, we see a much larger percentage. So one thing the military was worried about, if a bomb goes off and we want to detect concussion with the eye tracker, what happens if they're sleep deprived? So we took 100 soldiers and we sleep deprived them. We found that we had a different signal. It wasn't the same as concussion. So here's 6 o'clock at night and a soldier. They keep them up. There's a place up in Natick Army base where they torture soldiers. They make them cold, hot, sleep deprive them, don't give them enough food. Anyway, this experiment, they deprive them of sleep. And so what you see is 6 o'clock at night, they keep them up. 6 o'clock in the morning, what do you see? You see increased variance in this direction. They're spatially disoriented. They don't have a problem with timing. What we see in concussion is this, forward jumps. And a lot of concussion patients sleep deprived, so they have variance in that direction too. So most of the Stanford students look like this because they don't get enough sleep. And a lot of other people who don't get enough sleep look like this. So we can actually monitor readiness, work readiness, cognitive readiness, combat readiness, and a lot of it relates to this. So this is who you want to pick on the draft for NFL, not this or this. And you can see both when you do that. This is a paper we published on the 10,000 people showing that In kids, prediction is developing. Actually, kids have got very good prediction. The problem is they don't have good brakes. Oh, we all know that, right? So they don't have good inhibition. And so what's happening is you're getting myelination, and around the early 20s, myelination gets completed, and you have good inhibitory control. That's why everybody wants to hire a 25-year-old, because they've got good inhibitory control. They can do lots of things at once. When you get up to my age, we're all struggling. We have little strategies we have to slow down things a little bit, but we can keep in there. So you can see that there's sort of a U-shaped curve here in terms of the eye tracking. So the new thing is, how are we defining concussion? So it's a visual disorientation problem. And they're visually disoriented either with the outside world moving, they're trying to keep up with it, or they're moving with respect to the outside world. Those are two things, or an equiplash. It's one of those three, and they can be all three together, they can be separate, and we're now defining concussion subtypes based on this. And from that, you get migraine headaches, cognitive fatigue, anxiety, depression, and everyone has a sleep problem. So this is the subtypes. So ocular motor is the eye tracking, vestibular ocular is they're moving with respect to that. Fatigue, cervical spine whiplash, migraine headaches. So this is going to be the future of concussion diagnosis. We're going to find out, because each one of these is treatable. If you find they have a migraine, you treat the migraine. If they have ocular motor problem, you do vision training. Vestibular motor, you do vision training. So we can target that, and people get quicker a lot faster. So everyone gets cardio exercise. Sleep is really important. Everyone's sleep is disrupted in concussion. And so getting good sleep is important. We educate the patients, not a brain injury, to expect full recovery, and we do visual orientation training. So this just shows you, these are athletes without concussion, but about 5% of them have problems. And you can see that this person's really good, excellent. This person has got poor eye tracking over on the left side. So you can see that if they have something coming over from the left, they wouldn't be paying attention. This person down here more has got a problem. And so you can select out people and train up their visual orientation, even though they haven't had a concussion. So right now, all the Pac-12 schools will be using this platform. The Golden State Warriors bought this platform. They're actually using it now for monitoring fatigue and concussion. University of Texas, Notre Dame, Mass General Hospital, obviously Stanford. And we're using this platform, and right now, the company's targeting concussion, but there's a lot of different markets. When you start looking at attention, there's obviously many markets. So you can look at the beginning where kids are developing attention with learning disabilities. We can see they have a different eye tracking signal. ADHD, we're working with pharmaceutical companies to look at the eye tracking in terms of efficacy of their drugs. Concussion diagnosis, where we're right now focusing the company. Obviously, fatigue evaluation, performance. We just recently got our 12th patent, which is if you know somebody's attention, you can change content, which is a consumer issue. You can right now, we're talking to somebody, you can change the way you are with that person, looking at their eyes, seeing if they're paying attention. But right now, you look at a book, it doesn't do that. So there's a possibilities now with AR and VR to actually have interaction with the persons in terms of the content. So that's where this comes in terms of AI. So the iSync analytics can enable content type and rated delivery to change based on our level of attention from the eye tracking. And also we can have training to improve attention. So I think I'm done. There we go. Thank you. Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
It's a fascinating presentation. It seems this diagnostic can be used in many different areas. What about alcohol or caffeine?
Or marijuana.
What is this?
Well, actually, the one test, the sobriety test, the police stop you. The one test that's allowed in court is smooth pursuit. That's the one that they look for. So it's amazing that they don't have quantifiable smooth pursuit. So we're actually looking into, and then also for marijuana, they don't have a test. The police is really looking for is, can you pay attention enough to drive? But we're sort of focused on alcohol. But you get somebody who's 2 or 3 days sleep deprived, they can look like they are drunk. I mean, they have the same risk. So what they should be doing is screening for attention, regardless of the cause, and then take them to the police station and figure out what it is. But I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
So concussion seems like the way you're defining it is something that impairs
Right.
So is there anything does this technology allow you to start to track subconcussive kids?
Yeah.
Are you working in that direction?
Yeah, the problem is that we haven't defined concussion, so we don't have good diagnostic criteria. So somebody says you have a concussion, it can, maybe you had a headache. And we know that 40% of people come to you with headache don't have a concussion, they just have a migraine headache. And so we have to diagnose the concussions properly. I think now, the latest article actually shows it used to be concussion, then it was subconcussive, now it's just hits, which is was done in mice, so a little bit. I think the whole public is really super aware of this problem now, and anything that comes out that even hints at CTE. So a lot of kids are not playing football now, they're playing lacrosse. And by the way, the number one cause for concussion in college, actually, the number one cause of concussions, do you know what it is? Biking, because more people ride bikes. But in sports, it's wrestling. So, but I see all sports. It's not just football. I see basketball, soccer. Everyone thinks you have your kids go play soccer, they're not going to get concussions. They will get concussions. It'll be around there. I think the main thing is get your kids to have a good night's sleep so they can pay attention in the morning when they play, school and sports. And it's a big sleep is a big national problem. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah.